Hey, and welcome to Com 101. There's just so much to talk about in the new year already. So let's get right into it because I don't know that we'll have time over the course of every week to cover everything that has already happened here in January. I hope everybody had a nice holiday and welcome to 2026. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to start in Venezuela. I won't pretend, like the people that are in our government and State Department, that I'm an expert on the geopolitics of South America. But here are some facts. First, the Venezuelan oil industry was developed in the 1920s by what are now two companies, one American and one that was Dutch and British. Two, there were contracts between the companies and the Venezuelan government, not the American government and the Venezuelan government, and not the British and Dutch governments in Venezuela. Three, the companies were given rights to produce oil and pay royalties and taxes to the Venezuelan government, and those contracts were set to expire in 1983. Four, in the mid-1970s, the Venezuelan government paid the companies and took over the drilling themselves. The companies were compensated, and it was in no way controversial. This was essentially a renegotiation, as one does, similar to when you hire people to build a casino and then you don't pay them, or when you hire someone to illegally knock down a building that you live in but you don't own and you have no right to knock down and then you don't pay them, or when you hire people to tune pianos at the casino and then you don't pay them. Or when you renegotiate former elected officials' deals by, canceling out their executive orders. Some of these instances are completely legitimate. Some of them, not so much. In the case of Venezuela and these oil companies, both parties agreed, and so no harm, no foul. So, cut to the 1990s. Venezuela actually re-invites the foreign oil companies to come back and invest in Venezuelan oil. ConocoPhillips, Chevron, etc. are invited back in to invest in something called the Orinoco Belt. I'm probably mispronouncing this. But Venezuela negotiates that they will still hold their national oil company, but the private firms will be able to, drill, distribute, develop oil, invest in the land, and operate. 1999, Hugo Chavez comes to power. And eventually, Chavez says, I'm changing the contract. Now, by the way, at this point, I think the oil companies are still building their pipelines. They haven't actually started doing the work yet, other than it's the pre-work, essentially. So Chavez comes to power. About 5 years later, he says, I'm changing these contracts. The way a lot of dictators and government officials, leaders, and corporate overlords even tend to do. He strong-arms the companies. He wants more profits and for Venezuela to be a bigger shareholder. Chevron accepts this deal because they're just probably it's not worth the fight. Exxon and ConocoPhillips don't accept the deal. Chavez kicks them out, and Exxon and ConocoPhillips take the Venezuelan government, to International Arbitration Court for breach of contract. The court awards Exxon $1 billion, and they award ConocoPhillips $9 billion plus interest. Venezuela has not yet completed paying this debt, and now it's over 20 years later. So, of course, ConocoPhillips is still a huge debt holder of the Venezuelan government. They're owed a ton of money. It's not great. Now, I know a little bit about this because I remember it a little bit. Because in the late 90s, early aughts, my dad refused to ever go to a Citgo gas station. And that was because Citgo got its gas directly from Venezuela because the holding company owned, like the Venezuelan government had a holding company that owned Citgo, essentially, or the majority stake in Citgo. In fact, at the time, several right-wing talk radio hosts were doing like a encouraged folks who listened to boycott Citgo stations. So I don't know if it worked ultimately. I do know when I got my license, I never went to a Citgo because one, I would never hear the end of it if I had, and two, I did know that Chavez was a bad dude. The saving grace for me was that there weren't a ton of Citgo stations around, and not being a Red Sox fan, I didn't really care. Now, all that said, we should pay our debts. Everyone should. We should pay out the contracts of money that we owe people. We should pay people that build our casinos and that tune the pianos in our casinos, and we should just pay our contracts and our debts. Otherwise, that's stealing. We should also put the money we say is going to childhood cancer charities into childhood cancer charities. But, because that's also stealing if you don't do that. But another important fact about all of this is that while these companies in the 90s were invested in Venezuela's oil, they never owned the oil. Despite the claims from President Trump that Venezuela stole the oil from American oil companies, that is simply not true. And while Maduro is a bad guy, 100% evil bad guy, because two things can be true at once, he can be evil, and the US can have violated international law in kidnapping him. But yeah, he's also not actually the one who did the deal or reneged on the deal anyway. There's another facet to all of this that I'd like to highlight very quickly, because words have meaning. So let's listen briefly to Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt answering some questions the other day. I don't know when this is being posted. As I'm recording it, it was yesterday. From CBS's Ed O'Keefe about the Venezuelan oil. Roll the tape.
And also with the private oil industry to execute on this historic energy deal that's not only good for the United States, but it's also going to revive the prosperity, the safety, the security of both the United States and Venezuela as well. Ed.
Following up on the oil part of it, the 30 to 50 million barrels of oil, how exactly is that going to work? You're getting it out of Venezuela into the United States?
Yes.
Then,
that's exactly right. So as you know, Ed, as the president announced last night, this was the sanctioned oil that was basically just sitting in barrels, sitting on ships because of the effective quarantine of the United States of America. And the interim authorities have agreed to release that oil to the United States, so it will be arriving here at home very soon. The United States government has already begun marketing Venezuelan crude oil in the global marketplace for the benefit of the United States, engaged the world's leading commodity marketers, key banks to execute and provide financial support for these crude oil and crude product sales. All proceeds from the sale of Venezuelan crude oil and products will first settle in U.S.-controlled accounts at globally recognized banks to guarantee the legitimacy and integrity of the ultimate distribution of proceeds, and those funds will be dispersed for the benefit of the American people and the Venezuelan people at the discretion of the United States government.
Okay. Well, there's quite a lot to be concerned with. Some of it's just in sentence structure. But what I actually want to highlight is one word.
Dispersed for the...
So, I guess the MAGA folk are actually okay with redistributing wealth. As long as it's other people's wealth and their guy is the one doing the redistributing. They'll never see the money. even though he says they will. They'll just keep being lied to and keep lapping it up. But, such as it is. Comment, like, subscribe. Be sure to catch the next Com 101. Thanks for watching.